As a parent, I have found that sometimes the hottest commodity you can get in your life is personal time and personal space. That sometimes it is really hard to just get a time to be by yourself. This was really bad for us when we lived in Arizona and we had one of those modern open concept houses where everyone could see and hear everything everybody did, except if you were in your bedroom, so everyone was always running to their bedrooms. Now we have a 1955 house with hallways and doors. I call it closed concept. And now we can all disappear and we have to work to talk to each other. I guess you have to pick your poison sometimes. But it can get to feeling sometimes when you're just around people like, what is the phrase? I don't even have thoughts of my own. It's just always little voices, people wanting me, people who have something for me, all the sounds, always questions, always people demanding my attention. And most of it is innocent. Your kid really does need water, and he really does need to read that book, and his brother did call him a poopy pants, But that doesn't change the fact that you still don't have time for yourself. And it still gets exhausting. And so then what happens? Well, you end up getting irritable, and you end up getting short-tempered, and you start getting snippy at things when you probably wouldn't in another day and kind of wish you wouldn't. Or maybe you find a way to hide. You just realize that there's just no way I can successfully make that shopping trip without also hitting the salon. I mean, you can't get everything at Bi-Mart. Or you bottle it up, right? You bottle it up, and you try to be nice until you can't handle it anymore, and then you really snap, and you say something you really wish you wouldn't have said just to get him to leave you alone. And then when you calm down, you regret it. Because it doesn't really solve the underlying issue, which is they still need your attention for something. The need is still there even after you yell and say something mean. They're just going to come back for it later. You just get a little bit of a pause. They're going to keep coming. I was reading about this doctor. He was in Nevada somewhere, and I think he was in Vegas at some big hospital and said, you know what, I want my kids to grow up with a small town. And so he moved to some very small town, one of those he's the only doctor in the town kind of towns. And he said that eventually he had to quit because people wouldn't leave him alone. And it got to the point where he built a wall around his backyard, which is a common thing in desert climates. You don't just put up a fence, you put up an actual wall. And he built a wall. And he said what did it was one Sunday, he was having a family barbecue in the backyard, and a guy pulled up a ladder and climbed over the wall on a Sunday afternoon for a barbecue just because he had to get the doctor's attention at that moment. It was not an emergency. He was not bleeding out. Of course, if he was bleeding out, he probably wouldn't have been able to drive to the house, pull out a ladder, climb up over the wall, jump down, right? And he said, I just can't do it anymore. They won't respect my boundaries and leave me alone. And, yes, I know that, people call doctors all the time, and sometimes people have mental illness or they want attention, or, people in any sort of helping profession, you figure out real quickly that there are some people who won't leave you alone unless you are very clear. But that's not to say that the requests are always illegitimate. I mean, people have health needs on the weekend. It's just more than one person can take care of. Which brings me back to this story of Jesus and this Canaanite woman. As the story goes, Jesus is in Tyre and Sidon. That's modern-day Lebanon. So it's outside of Israel. And this woman comes up to him. She's shouting at him. Jesus doesn't answer. The disciples get sick of hearing her and say, Jesus, make her go away. And Jesus kind of blows them off too, saying, you know what? She's not my concern because she's not one of the house of Israel. She's not Jewish, so she's not really what I came here for. And then what does the woman do? She shouts some more. She ups the ante. And then Jesus gets irritated and he throws out that line, "It is not fair to give the children's food to the dogs." And you just read that and you go, wow. I mean, you can't read that without getting a little bit disturbed. You're calling the woman a dog? I mean, that's just mean. And in the Middle East, that's not just a little, that's a slur. I'm not going to try to find an English equivalent for you. But it's some version of, you're a foreigner, you're beneath me, you're not worth my time. Now, there's a whole school of thought here that reads this and says, you know, Jesus wasn't angry and mean, he was testing her. He was just testing her to see her reaction. And I got to admit, I never really bought that. I mean, being mean to people to prove that they have enough faith that they'll come back, I mean, that's hazing, right? Isn't that how hazing works? I'm going to line you up behind the frat house, and we're going to paddle you while calling you names. And if you really want to be my friend, you'll put up with it, you know? Or kind of like the drill sergeant who lines you up and calls you a maggot, you know, just so you understand who's in charge here, knock you down, but till he builds you up later. I don't know, I've had trouble with the idea that Jesus is hazing the woman, or that he's like means testing her, you know. Does she really need a healing? Let's make it a little harder for her to get it, and then we'll find out if she really needs the healing or if she's just a moocher. That's not Jesus. Jesus usually just gives out healings pretty willy-nilly. I've always thought that should be my gospel memoir, the willy-nilly gospel. I might get 5 whole people to buy it. But that's Jesus, right? I mean, he usually just gives it away. If someone's sick, he just gives it to him. He doesn't usually pick through. But I do know, you know, it does say in the Gospels, people followed Jesus everywhere he went. They were always there, always around him, that he had to run away to get away from people because there were so many of them. And, you know, and I don't blame them. They're desperate. They're out of options. And their problems, in their minds, are infinitely more important than Jesus' time to meditate. I mean, and then you get this story, which is actually in the Bible more than once, which is kind of amazing, because it doesn't make Jesus look good. You know, you always think if I was going to write a propaganda book to try to convince people Jesus was the Messiah, this would not be something I would put in it, which is why I think it's a real story. It's not something people would invent. Now, it has a happy ending, right? The woman gives this great response. So Jesus says, I'm not going to give the food to the dogs. And she goes, well, yes, Lord, even the dogs get to eat the crumbs at the master's table. And I could just see the whole crowd going, oh, Jesus, you got burned. She's smart. She got him. Jesus lost that rap battle. So what does he do? Okay, he heals the daughter. He gives in. He has a moment of anger. Then he relents. He's not above being corrected, which again is a different Jesus. It's a more human Jesus, one who gets mad and says things he regrets and then walks it back. It's always, remember, that human side that we struggle with the most, because to be human is to have flaws and emotions and to be irritated and angry. I mean, on the one hand, you know, again, I get it. You know, there's that woman, her daughter's possessed with a demon. If it was me or you, we would do anything for her, right? We'd do anything to get her. And now suddenly you hear this Jesus guy's in town. You've heard that he can work miracle cures. You've heard that he's chased out demons before. Nothing else you try has worked. Are you going to sit there and take the chance that if you wait until Jesus is ready to talk to you, that he might already have left town and your daughter is still at home, like chanting for Beelzebul or whatever? You going to take that chance? Are you just going to wait and be polite and hope that he gets around to it? You're not going to risk it. What are you going to do? You need his attention now. You can't risk that he'll disappear. You need his attention now, no matter what. Even if it means you got to be a pest. Even if you have to put up with him calling you names. Your daughter has everything to lose. He just has a few more moments of his time. On the other hand, even Jesus only had so many hours in the day, and, we'd all get tired from crowds pressing in. So there really isn't a bad guy in this story. At least not counting the name calling. The name calling is kind of bad. But, you got a legitimate need meeting a legitimate need. You've got sickness meeting exhaustion. You've got desperation meeting irritation and more exhaustion. And what's even more interesting is that Jesus himself, in other places, tells his disciples, if the prayer doesn't work, just keep asking. Keep knocking at the door. He literally gives that command. If you don't get an answer once, keep asking. The woman is doing exactly what he taught. And it works. One of the things I had to learn growing up was how to be a pest. It's one of those life lessons of being an adult, how to properly be a pest. Because I used to go out of my way to avoid being that guy that the service people would talk about in the kitchen, behind the swingy doors. And I know that because I was one of those guys behind the swingy doors once. And we did talk about those people who were annoying or overly demanding. And I was always so self-conscious that I'd be nervous about speaking up for myself or trying things. And I know that sounds weird because you're thinking, Lars has a hard time speaking. This wasn't in church where I was invited to do this. But sometimes you just have to understand, I think I had to learn this, sometimes business is just business and personal is just personal. And in personal you make friends, and in business you make results. And so I had to learn to question the mechanic when he said I needed all these extra really expensive things done to my car or else for sure I was going to die. I had to learn to question the guy at the tire place. This actually happened once. The guy looked at my old tires and said, oh, and he took out his tire gauge. Oh, you have so little tread. You know that the cops here in Batavia, they'll bust you for having racing skids. I'm like, racing skids? What cop is going down the road looking that closely at the tread on my tires? I'm like, really? Racing skids? Yeah, yeah, you'll get busted. And, I had to learn, he's just trying to sell me new tires, of course. So I had to learn to be suspicious and go, are you sure about that? Let me take it to your competitor and find out if that's really the case. I had to learn to ask those questions. I had to learn to be difficult sometimes. I had to ask about all the options for loans and repayments and interests. And I had to make sure when I bought the home that I got in the seller's face and pointed out all the little things they needed to fix, knowing for sure that would make them curse me when I said, you really do need to upgrade, that furnace. You can't go through life trying to never make people mad at you. And once you understand that there are more important things than that, that's when you can start getting results. Because the world is full of competing interests. I have mine, and you have yours, and they have theirs, and we meet somewhere in the middle. But if I just don't want to make you mad, you'll get yours and I'll get ripped off. If I'm a jerk, of course, then I'll probably get nothing, or I'll get food with something put in it that I don't want in it. So then there's this infinitely complex minefield of social cues you have to learn to walk through. How to put enough of a smile on your face while putting enough pressure on them, while telling someone again they need to do it, while making them a little bit mad, but then being a little bit nice. There's a trick to it. You have to be just nice enough, but just mean enough. Yeah, but what you have to do is you have to advocate for yourself and the people you love and the people who don't have a voice. And doing that involves getting into people's faces and irritating them and taking their time and messing with their day and calling them out when they try to blow you off and doing it again and doing it in public and watching them lash out at you, because how else are you going to get a response? Waiting? Hoping? Saying pretty please? That's not how advocating works. It's more like the squeaky wheel gets the grease. If anything, when you look at the story of this woman up there in Tyre and Sidon, and why it's in the Bible when it makes Jesus look so bad, I wonder if it's because we're not supposed to take our lesson as much from Jesus as from her. What if she's the example here? What if she's the template? What if the point is that we see how healing can be brought to those who don't have a voice if someone is willing to speak up for them? What if the point is that sometimes we should be a little bit more pushy to get results for those who can't do it for themselves? What if it's really about learning that being a pest is sometimes a good and a holy thing to do, especially with people in power who have the tools to help but not the willingness? Instead of being so culturally shocked at Jesus' lack of niceness, which I know for us Lutherans, that's bad stuff, right? That's the 11th commandment. But instead of being so shocked at his demeanor and trying to come up with a way to explain away what looks like a real lack of self-control, what if we were admiring the woman and that all she was willing to do for her sick daughter? And remember that even Jesus says to keep pestering and keep knocking at that door and keep praying, because sometimes that's how you get an answer even from God. Amen.